All right, so today we invited you all here because we are presenting a data duel, and we're looking at the industry standards out there, all of the analysis platforms that have been around or newcomers over the last 30 years, and we're going to essentially compare and contrast it to our technology, Blue Fusion. We're going to give you a live preview of what that looks like. We're going to have a panel discussion with 4 experts from the field, and we're going to open it up to Q&A, and we want to answer all the questions that you have. Now, if you haven't met me before, my name is Dallas Knight. I'm the Executive Vice President here with Blue Fusion Technologies. My background started in the Army at 17, and then I transitioned into the civilian space as an intelligence analyst at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, exclusively assigned to the DEA there under the Nevada HIDTA for about a decade. And then I was recruited out to work for corporate America. And about 5 years ago now, actually 5 years ago in exactly 8 days, I made the transition to come over to Blue Fusion, where I've had the incredible privilege of being a part of the innovative technology that you're going to see here today. And you'll understand so much more on why I made those decisions and why I'm so passionate about this and why I'm so excited to share all of this with you guys today as we move forward. But before we get started, we have a special guest popping in. Bruce Parkman is our founder of not only what you're probably familiar with, Blue Light, but also Blue Fusion Technologies. And he has some words that he'd like to share with you today. Sir?
Hello, folks. Bruce Parkman here, as Dallas said. I'm the founder of Blue Fusion and Blue Light. I want to welcome you to this data duel today. We're very excited to present this to you. As you know, we've been working in the data space for a long time. And, you know, as Dallas said, it's going to be all about Blue Fusion's ability to connect the data and automate analytics faster than anything in the world versus the highly manual processes that our analysts are using now and the extract, transform, and load process that are used to deliver them data, not in real time. I know a lot of you are looking forward to seeing a duel between our product and i2 Analyst Notebook. Unfortunately, we received a legal letter yesterday asking us to not use their product, and so we will refrain from doing so. But I want you to know that, you know, this was never about 2 analytics products. It's about data. It's about an industry that has failed to improve and deliver data to you, the analyst, to you, the police chief, the police sergeant, the military leader, in a timely manner to make decisions, and how our product makes other products even better than they've ever been before. As a lot of you know, we were a plugin not only for i2, but now are becoming a plugin for a wide variety of products that are out there on the market. So this is about data. It's about data access, data availability, because when it comes to data, nobody does data than Blue Fusion. So if you did not know as well, as our product can be used as a standalone position, but as a product, it can also serve as a plugin. And as that is the relationship that we're building right now with many products in the space. And we hope to be working with you in the future. So I welcome you to this data duel to show you the advantages of what we're bringing to support your data needs against what you've been dealing with for the past 20 years. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dallas.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your words. So everyone, your patience is appreciated. And again, if you have any comments, whatever, throw those in the chat. I want you guys to be active today. Again, I wish I could be standing here in front of all of you. The panel that you see before you, we're going to get really active a little bit later. But first and foremost, I want to share some information with you. So I'm going to jump back in and share my screen real quick. And this is where you guys come in, okay? I want you to use that chat. I want to see you guys busy. And it is time for some self-analysis. So let's get chatty. I want your answers in the chat. Let's see the numbers, all right? I have 3 questions to ask you. The first, how many data sources do you currently access? If I gave you a phone number, a name, an address, a vehicle plate, anything in between, how many different data sources are you going to go hit? This includes your RMS, your CAD, Intel repositories, HR records, law enforcement indices. That's all internal stuff, but also your external, right? Your Accurate, your Clears, your LPRs, your pin links, your Excel spreadsheets, all of that. throw that in the chat. I want to see some numbers. Let me know on average, any given day. Again, I'm throwing a phone number at you, an address, a person's name. How many different data sources are you going to go access? I'm going to share with you a poll that I did on LinkedIn over the last couple of weeks where I show some average answers, but I really am curious to see how that compares to what you guys are seeing. I'm seeing upwards of 80, which is crazy to think when we're about to do some math together. But 15, 12, 20 to 25, 40. I mean, keep throwing them in there, all right? So keep that number in mind as we move forward. So how many data sources are you accessing? Now we're moving forward to the second question for you. And again, throw these in the chat. How much time on average are you spending in each source? Okay, so think about any of those sources that we just kind of went through and how much time you might spend in that source. So that includes remembering the URL, signing in, running your queries, sifting through the results, finding what's pertinent in your investigation, downloading those results and putting it to the side and continuing to run your queries. Okay, how many minutes? Let's go with minutes. Is it 3 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 12 minutes? Throw some numbers in the chat for me. Let's see how those compare to the polls that I put out on LinkedIn. So everything, we got 5 minutes, we have 40 minutes. Yeah, it's absolutely going to depend on the individual data sources. 5 minutes to an hour. I mean, that's a huge spread. And again, yes, it's going to depend on how many data sources you have and what data sources you're actually looking at. So great feedback, guys. Thank you for being active. This is really good insight, and it shares amongst all of you that you're not alone in this situation. You're not alone in these challenges. All right, so third and final question for you. How many pieces of information do you process? Now, this is a tricky one, right? Because this is day to day. On some days back in my previous role at the police department, I would have hundreds of phone numbers come in because I'm doing telephone poll analysis, right? But just on average, ballpark number, how many phones, emails, people, addresses, vehicles, IP addresses, whatever that may be, is coming across your desk that you're having to process. Again, ballpark numbers, throw those in the chat. Let's compare contrast across the world because we have countries represented from all over the world. Let's see who's doing what here. So as you throw those in the chat, and as you're thinking about these 3 numbers that you so kindly shared with me today, now I'm going to ask you to run through some math, okay? So if you take your first number times your second number, and then times that by your third number, that's approximately how many minutes, how much time that you are spending average just data shopping. That's just getting access to the information so that you can further the investigation, so that you can conduct analysis, so that you can come to conclusions, so you can support the operations in the field. Now, again, I have already shared with you that I've ran multiple polls over the last couple of years, and the numbers are typically the same across the board. Even the numbers that you guys are sharing with me today in the chat are about the same. And so I've shared the polls on the right, and I've done some math with you on the left. So average analysts, and I'm just taking the average answer, looking at 7 data sources, which according to you guys is on the conservative side. 7 data sources on an average of 5 minutes in each is about 35 minutes per piece of intelligence. Now, if we looked at just 10 pieces of information, 10 phones, 10 people, 10 addresses, or a combination of that's 350 minutes or 5.8 hours, okay? If you look over on the right, we have some polls, again, that I put out there on LinkedIn. I've asked analysts, investigators, detectives, agents, operators to partake in. And the average answer on how many data sources are hitting are more than 10. I would say that that stands with this crowd as well. And then when I ask about how long it takes you to query the information and get the information and upload it into whatever you may be using to analyze and further your investigation, it's upwards of 30 plus minutes. Again, sounds like that resonates with this crowd as well. So we're spending so much time just trying to get our hands on the information that the investigative process, the analysis process is essentially suffering because we're spending more than half of our day, depending on how many hours a day you're working, just again, trying to get our hands on the data. But it's not your fault, okay? This is a result of all of our information being siloed, okay? We have all these different data sources. We're trying to hit all of them. I remember having a sticky note, and we're talking 10 years ago, a big sticky note on the side of my monitor that had a list of all of my data sources, and I would just run through them, running my phones, running my names, running my addresses, and things weren't nearly as complex as they are now then. And I still had probably 12, 15 data sources that I had to run through. So because of that siloed data, we have tried ways, many organizations, companies, vendors have tried ways to streamline this workflow. And one of the traditionally addressed way is through the extract, transform, and load process, also known as ETL. Most of you who are analysts probably haven't heard of this, don't know what it is. But if you are accessing any type of data lake, okay, if you've heard about, taking your RMS, your CAD, and this, that, and the other data sources and then being combined into a big fat data lake, they are essentially doing an ETL process. There are other intelligence platforms out there that are saying that they are simplifying your analytical capability and streamlining your workflow by giving you access to all of your data. And what they're actually doing, if you were to ask them, is they're doing an ETL process. They're essentially copying, duplicating these different siloed data and putting it into a big fat data lake and saying, now you have access to all your information. Now, at first glance, that's great. It sounds wonderful. I run one query, I hit one data source, I get all my information, I saved loads of time, and I can go and move forward. But there's some problems with this process. First and foremost, that data is only replicated and duplicated on a timely manner. Most likely, it's one time per day, probably at midnight when most people are at home and not working on the information. So when I go in at 9 in the morning, my data is already 9 hours old, creating some inaccurate information. And as me being a thorough analyst, I'm going to end up going back to the originating data source because I want to just be sure that I have the most recent and accurate data. So now I'm creating duplicate efforts on my part. I'm wasting more time. So I'm just checking another data source, that's my data lake, that's been added to my list. And then what most of you who are just users of the software and the solutions and the data sources also don't understand or may not be aware of with this whole ETL process is that it requires a long-term maintenance, meaning someone in your department, in your organization, or someone who's been hired and contracted has to continually maintain this entire extracting it, transforming it, and loading it into the data lake. So what does that mean? It means funds. Funds and resources are allocated that don't necessarily need to be allocated for something that's creating old and inaccurate data and duplicate efforts. But hindsight, it was a good go. It was a good effort. And, everyone was just trying to help. And I respect the hell out of that. But at the end of the day, it is wasted time, it is wasted resources, and it is 1,000% wasted money, especially when we have a solution that can address not only everything I discussed, but also open source data, because we can't replicate and duplicate the entire World Wide Web, ladies and gentlemen. We can't stick that into a data lake. So we still have all these open source record vendors out there that specialize in business data and social media data and financials and crypto and all of these other things that we subscribe to, right? We have subscriptions to these data sources. We can't replicate all that information and also stick that into the data lake. So we're still having to data shop outside of our firewall. And then there's the whole deal of lack of integration across all those systems. So how do we address that? How do we resolve it? How do we try to fix this issue? Well, our mission with Blue Fusion is to create the most efficient workflow. And we do that through 3 primary ways. The first, we maintain the integrity of the data. We are not going to replicate. We're not going to duplicate. We're not going to move any of the originating data. Instead, we provide you direct and real-time access. I'm going to say that again because I keep hearing real-time, real-time, real-time over and over, and it's not. It's near real-time. But this is actual real-time access to not only your internal data sources, but also any of the external data sources that you are leveraging day in and day out. And if you're a part of a real-time crime center out there, how are you a real-time crime center when you're not getting access to real-time data? It's near real-time. So let's squash that and get real-time access to that information. And having direct access to real-time data means when you ask a question and you get your answers, you are going to have the most accurate information and you'll have confidence in that. Now, the second way that we create the most efficient workflow is we're going to simplify, but at the same time, amplify your technology, existing integrations, as well as anything that you want to grow into. So we leverage and we integrate with the systems you're already using by building those connectors. And then we provide you one interface so that you can access all of those sources and all of those systems and get all through our no coding drag and drop querying interface that I'm really excited to show you here momentarily. So you don't need to know how to write SQL queries. You don't need to know how to write code. If you're a new analyst or a detective who's filling the role or plays, wears both hats as the analyst, you can come in and use this technology with almost zero learning curve. And that brings me to my third and final way that we're really creating the most efficient workflow, and probably the dark horse in the list, but I feel a very important aspect, is that we're empowering the entire team. A lot of times analysts are left with all of this weight on our shoulders to have access to all of this information, query it, look through it, and then convey that knowledge to our counterparts in the field, whether those are agents, officers, operatives, whatever that may be. And now those that are working in the field primarily can also have access to that data and make real-time operational decisions. Because here's the thing, I worked 410s at the police department, and Friday through Sunday, I was at home. But the guys were still out on surveillance on a Friday or Saturday night, late 2 a.m. in the morning, sitting on a house, writing down plate numbers. And yeah, they can get access to their records management system and they can run those plates, but they're going to get records and they're going to get almost zero intel. They don't have access to all of the information that I had back at my desk. If I had had Blue Fusion, then they would be able to run queries against intel that maybe I had dug up that day before and be able to make real-time operational decisions. They might have had just enough information to make a traffic stop on that guy, to ask a little bit more questions, to follow a car away from a house, to get more information, because they would have known that that vehicle popped up on a social media post earlier that day that I had looked at, but didn't quite have enough information to maybe feel like it was pertinent to share with my agent, officer, detective, or what have you. So it creates a more cohesive team. All right, so let's get into the live demo. Let's stop talking about it. Let's see it. And then just a reminder, if you have any questions about anything I've discussed or anything I'm about to show, please put that in the Q&A, but otherwise the chat is free for you guys to comment and discuss and have open communication with. Now, before I dive into the software, I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit, in that this is the scenario that we really wanted to show you side by side with some of the intelligence platforms that have been around for 20, 30 years in comparison to what I'm going to show you today. But if you have any of those platforms out there, I encourage you, matter of fact, I challenge you to do what I'm about to do in even half the amount of, I guarantee I can do it in even more than half of the amount of time that you could. So you want to go Doodle Duel with me, I will happily do so. I challenge you to do so. You can email me at dallas@bluefusion.com and I will happily do so. But for sake of this webinar, I'm going to show you what Blue Fusion has access to, but I want you to be thinking in your head as I go through these processes and as I start to ask these questions, how long it would take you in your current environment with your current situation and access to the data sources to get to the conclusions that I will get to. So to the scenario, this is mocked off of a case that I helped with quite some time ago, and everything has been changed. So there's no sensitive data here, no worries there. But on February 14, 2014, we had this lovely woman, this law-abiding citizen here, Christina Wagner, was arrested for shoplifting at a particular Nordstrom. She had a fake ID that identified her as Ava Suggett, it had her picture on it. She had a fraudulent credit card. And the only information that she shared with us was that a quote-unquote whiskey gave them to her and told her to purchase $500 worth of cosmetics, and then he in exchange would give her some cocaine. Now, we pulled surveillance for the footage of when Suggett had made some purchases, and we compared pictures, and we made the decision that they were one and the same, and they were the same person. So there are three primary questions that I'm going to be asking as I go through this scenario, and three primary questions that you can kind of keep in the back of your mind as I walk through this. And then again, I want you to think about what it would take for you in your current environment with your data and your tools to answer these questions given the data that I have access to. So let's talk about the data I have access to. I have access to financials, transaction records. I have access to an open source vendor like Alexis, TLO, Clear, Booster, name your flavor that you prefer, or all of them. I know most of us use multiple. And I have access to store information or HR records, human resources records, as well as local law enforcement, criminal history, some DMV stuff, about 8 sources total, okay? So we're right in that average of what we discussed earlier, about 8 to 10 data sources that I'm gonna be accessing. So as we go through this scenario, again, I want you to keep that in mind that that's what I'm accessing as I answer these questions, all right? So out of this, and I need to move my Zoom thing out of the way so I can see, and into Blue Fusion. And you know what, I'm even just going to show you what that looks like. So Blue Fusion is accessed from a web browser, which means you can operate using it from a tablet, a PC. It doesn't matter the operating system. None of those things. Don't have to download anything on your computer. You don't have to update that software as time progresses. You're always just going to have access to whatever your IT department designates, right? So I come in, I sign in to my account, and then based on my credentials, I have access to all of the data sources that I'm supposed to have access to, as well as all of the information within those data sources that I have access to. So let me just take a step back and explain implementation a little bit. So our Blue Fusion team comes in, we ask, okay, based on those, 10, 15, whatever, however many data sources you guys shared with us on that list, which ones are pertinent? Again, like if you could only pick 6 today, what are you going to hit? We take that, we compare it to the data source connectors that we've already built, and then we prioritize those and put those in play. It takes us on average around 30 days for full implementation beginning to end, depending upon the connectors and how many you have and if anything is brand new. That's a discussion for another day. But as a user, once you tell me, okay, Dallas, you're operational, here's your credentials, here's your sign-in, here's your password, here's the URL you go to access Blue Fusion. And by the way, you have access to these 8 data sources from within the environment. I'm ready to go. Now, I can see which data sources I have access to by going to my connectors. I can see, I can turn them on or off and depict, when I'm running my queries, what I'm hitting. That's useful for when you're hitting subscription-based sources, so that have an abundance of information. Maybe I just want to look at vetted data initially, or maybe I do want to explore those subscription-based, or maybe you're an organization that gets charged by the query with those particular subscriptions. You can have control over that. But running the queries, this is so fun, guys. There's 2 primary ways to query your data. We have a visual query and we have a geospatial query. I'm going to show you the visual query first. And being that it's very visual in nature, I'm just going to jump into one of these that I've already done. Again, just saving time and face. But essentially, it's just like any other graphical database or link analysis tool you may have used, where you are visually dragging and dropping your entities, links, and assigning your properties. So this query that I've designed, which would look like a whole lot of crazy SQL code on the back end, is looking for a person whose last name is Wagner. Remember, that's our target, who's associated to a financial account. So I want to see all financial accounts that she's associated with, and then which organizations she's associated those financial accounts or made purchases or had returns on, and I've designated Nordstrom as that organization. I want to focus on that bit of information. Now, to change any of these things, you'll see me do some editing here momentarily, so I'll go over that in a moment. But I also want to point out before I submit the query that we can save these queries. And, first glance, yeah, that's great. I can save the query, I can come back in, I can leverage it again. But really, there's a couple other reasons that the saved query is so great to have. First and foremost, I can make my saved query public, which means my broader team can leverage my query. Because let's face it, as analysts, detectives, agents, whatever that may be, we ask very similar minded questions across all of our investigations. So why not lend a helping hand and leverage each other's efforts, and again, save a little bit more time and have a, person, transaction, organization query set up. I just have to put in a few of my parameters and then hit go. But honestly, that's not even my favorite part about the saved query. My favorite part is being able to turn this recurring query on. By hitting this recurring query button, I am now essentially hiring a virtual analyst to work for me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at my discretion. I determine when I want this query to be run next. So maybe it's at the top of my hour or midnight tonight when I'm home in bed, and then at what interval I want it to run. I can have it run as often as every hour or as infrequent as every 24th week. And then I can decide, other than myself, who is going to be notified of these query results when they return. So let's say I'm working in tandem on an investigation with another analyst, or maybe the agents, detectives, officers that I'm working on the investigation with, are working surveillance at 2 in the morning and they want to know if this plate comes up on an LPR type of situation, then they can be alerted too. Or maybe it's a high profile investigation where management wants to be aware if something comes up. Any of those situations and anything else that you can think of, you designate who is going to be notified of these query results, click the box, hit save, and everyone will be notified. Now, this is initially an internal notification that would be here within your alerts, but we can set it up to also send an external email notification, basically saying you have an alert waiting for you, jump into Blue Fusion and check it out. No sensitive data is ever passed. All right, so back to our query. I'm going to go ahead and hit submit, and you're going to see a box pop up, and it's going to show you a status of all the separate data sources that my query is hitting simultaneously. So I forgot to mention that our technology is patented, guys. That's why no one else can do it, and that's awesome. And the patented part of our technology is what you just saw. It's that federation. It's the simultaneous query across all of those data sources at the same time. And then there's some magic sauce that's happening as those queries are being run and translated back into your results. We are cleaning, we are normalizing, and we are putting the data in a format that you design. I'm going to say that again. We're cleaning, normalizing, and put the data in a format that you design automatically. So no more opening your spreadsheets and having to clean all that mess. No more trying to figure out if this last name with an initial cap is actually the same person with this last name who's all caps, because the two data sources didn't mesh well together. We do all that through the connector during the implementation. We put all that work up front so that you don't have to do it when you come in here. Now, when I get the results, on the left-hand side, you'll see a synopsis of not only the entity and relationship types, but a quick quantity count of what it brought forth. And then I can focus on any bit of this information and start to interrogate my data. So I have my results. I'm looking at it in a listed view. I can see her financial accounts. I can see the account types. These are all gift cards. I can look at the organization. Now I can understand, these are the 4 separate Nordstrom stores. These are Nordstrom store numbers that she's tapping into. I can look at her. And then this is just a quick view on the right-hand side, right? But if I look at the individual record here, you'll notice that there are 2 tabs here at the top for Christina Wagner. These tabs are representative of the 2 separate data sources that were merged together during that query to bring together to make one record for you. Now, why is this important that we have 2 tabs? Why not just mesh it all together and say, you know what, here's Christina Wagner? Well, when it comes to writing intelligence reports in the discovery process and any type of validation on why you've made the conclusions you have, we always have to source our information. Have you ever gone down a rabbit hole and forget how the hell you got there? I have 1,000 times. And then I have to backtrack and I have to remember, oh yeah, I got the address from Accurate, and then that address was associated with this person, and I ran that person in Facebook, and that person was associated with this person, and then I ran that person in law enforcement indices, and they had a criminal history where they were arrested with this person. And before I know it, I'm 7 sources deep and I forgot how I got there. This allows me to see exactly what data came from where always. That way I can source it. I can go to the originating source if I need to pull the raw record for whatever reason, and I can reference it at any point. So it was very imperative that we had this a part of our solution. Now, once we've ran our query, looked through it, sifted it, and said, yeah, this is exactly what I was hoping to get, and it always doesn't necessarily always have to take that long, I want to see it visually. Now, listen, graphical representation of data has been around for over 30 years. Everybody has it nowadays. It's a norm. And the reason is because a picture is worth 1,000 words, and quite frankly, way more than that nowadays. So we absolutely wanted to bring this capability to you guys as well. Yes, we can look at it in a listed view. It's very helpful to toggle through it and understand its dynamics, but you don't get the same aspect, the same understanding as looking at it through a picture. So here's the graphical representation of that same data. We can see Christina Wagner in the middle, her 4 accounts, and the 4 separate stores that she used those gift cards at. Now, if we go back to our scenario, you remember that she had an alias of Ava Suggett. So I want to bring that data too. I essentially want to merge Christina and Ava together, and I want to see that information as a whole. So I'm very quickly going to go and edit my query. I'm going to edit my properties here. I'm going to search for the name on one of the properties for the person. I'm going to change this to Suggett real quick and hit apply and then hit submit. And now I'm looking at a whole new set of results as it runs through all of those separate data sources individually, cleans it, normalizes it, and then presents it in the way that I have chosen. So very quickly, I'm going to pause and ask you, how long would it have taken you to run through 8 separate data sources, running a query similar to mine, looking for Ava Suggett and Christina Wagner, as well as any financial accounts that they have leveraged at a Nordstrom store? So just run that through your head real quick while I push my new results to that same chart and essentially merge that data. So now I'm looking at both Ava and Christina's records. I don't necessarily want to merge them just yet because there might be individual things that pop up, but I am going to redraw some things momentarily here. I'm just going to segregate my organizations down to the bottom. And now I'm going to focus on my financial accounts because I'm curious if any of my financial accounts, the gift cards, the credit cards, anything like that, are connected to any other people. So I can do so, I can leverage all of those same data sources that I've been leveraging through our expand feature right here in this graphical interface. So the expand will allow me to do 2 things. I can do an expand all, which will bring anything and everything that these accounts are associated to. That could be people, that could be other accounts, that could be other stores, whatever that is. Basically an all or nothing type of approach. Or I can do a filtered expand and say, you know what, I only want to see other people that might be associated with these accounts for now. I'm going to keep it small. Now, if you flip it into, I'm going to go back to old methodologies that I used to use. I would essentially have a huge spreadsheet of all of my transactions for all of a time period that I asked for. And then I'd have to dump that into a graphical interface and try to sift through that information and find out what's pertinent. This methodology kind of flips that on its head and allows me to start from a very specific question and grow out that network as I get curious and explore. I think it's more relevant and tailored approach, but everyone, you know, to each their own, whatever you feel. You could absolutely bring in a more broader question and tailor down. I like to start very small and grow out. But anyway, so I'm going to start small and grow out. I'm looking at my financial accounts. I only want to see if there are other people associated with these accounts. And again, this is across all of the separate data sources that I have connections to. And I can see here that I brought in another person here. Sorry, my mouse is a little out there. So now I have another individual that I can explore. And if you remember, one of my initial questions that I needed to ask is, are there any other individuals that might be a part of this whole, thing? Is it just a one-person deal, or is there like a criminal organization that's hitting the Nordstrom stores? So I've already brought in another person. You know, we have Ava as an alias to Christina. We know there's a guy named Whiskey out there. So I'm starting to bring it together. So for me, I could go one of two ways here, and there's no wrong or right answer. I could look at the transactions in more depth, because one of the other questions are, you know, are there any patterns or trends that we might need to be aware of? So I will dive into transactions and look at some patterns and trends in a minute, but I'm more curious about my people. That's just kind of how I do things. Again, whatever methodology you want to use, there's no wrong answer. So looking at my three personas, and I say personas because Ava and Christina are technically the same person, but they might have completely different profiles. I'm going to leverage that expand feature again, doing my filter expand, but this time I want to bring back any houses that or addresses they may be associated with, any cases, maybe I have some criminal history there or case files that they've been a part of, any people associations that they may have, phones, vehicles, going to kind of keep it assets and cases. Hit next. Again, I'm hitting 8 separate data sources simultaneously, cleaning, normalizing, bringing that on my chart here. So again, I want you through this whole process, because I couldn't do a side-by-side for you today, and it breaks my heart, but you can do a side-by-side in your brain and figure out how long it would have taken you to do that. So now I have some assets here on my chart, and I want to grow this further because, as you probably know, assets a lot of times is where it ties people together. So I'm going to grab my addresses, my phones, and my vehicles, and I'm going to do an expand all. I want anything and everything that these things are connected to, and I'm going to go out 2 degrees. And so keep in mind, I'm running a query on all the phones, the addresses, and the vehicles that are on my chart, not only against 8 separate data sources, but I'm going to go out 2 degrees of separation, so 2 hops. Run that through. Again, I challenge you to try and do this in the amount of time that I am. So again, querying the data sources, cleaning, consolidating, it gives you a percentage on that. This is going to take a smidge lot longer than before because we're going out 2 degrees, but I immediately start to grow out my network. So focusing over here on the right, I see Chain has quite a few other financial accounts. So that's very peculiar and interesting to me. I could go down a whole other rabbit hole for that. But on this side, I have 2 more individuals that have been brought to light, and they're directly connected with our target. So this is interesting to me, more so than Chain at this point. So I'm going to kind of focus in on all of this information. And I'm just going to grab this bit of data, and I just want to grow this network out by 1 more degree and see if there's anything else that comes up. And you'll notice that this is kind of just a curious workflow. I can go in any direction that I want, but I'm slowly growing and exploring and analyzing. So now I've gone out just 1 degree, and I have a lot of ties here. Okay, so let's focus in on this for a little bit. We have multiple individuals that have come in. And what's interesting to me, if you look at the data, right, and the intel, is our guy who was directing Christina Wagner here went by Whiskey, and we have 2 men, I'm assuming men, that's an assumption on my part, 2 individuals with the last name Jameson. Coincidence? Maybe. Depends if you believe in coincidences. My hunch, my human instinct, which is why AI will never replace an intelligence analyst, but my gut instinct is there's some type of nexus here with these Jamesons and my Whiskey character. So, and I have this Mila Ryan that's here. So I'm just going to explore just these 3 individuals, which we've already kind of exploited Nelson, but I'm going to keep him highlighted there. Do just 1 degree expand, see if there's any other nexus or any other crossover that pops up on this chart, and see what we can find. So immediately I see this link come across with Mila, depends who you are. We have Dawn on the call, and his daughter's Mila, and I have a niece named Mila, so I go back and forth. Anyway, I digress. So 2 new bits of information came through. I have a case now, so I have intelligence or case information with Gavin. I want to look into that. And I have this link that comes across, and I can do my show cards and get a preview of that real quick, where it looks like she's directly tied to one of the stores and referenced as an employee. So one of the third questions that we needed to ask is there essentially any internal threat that the store needs to be aware of? So I could go in two directions here. I'm expanding upon the network. I haven't looked at trends just yet. And I'm also exploring the fact that there may be an insider threat here with Mila Ryan working at the store, being associated with a guy who's referenced in a case through their shared address, which also is shared with Nelson, and Nelson shares an address with Christina. This is how it all starts. But again, in a matter of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I've been able to come to all of this, access 8 data sources, not only have all of the information and all the references of this information, but I have it all displayed on a chart that I can reference as well. So the case, it's got a whole synopsis here where Gavin has an alias and he's got other addresses, and he has been basically suspected of credit card fraud and identification fraud and all the things that really fits the bill. So, my assumption, my analysis would be this might be our whiskey character, but we would need to dive more in. This is also where we work with our detectives, our agents, our officers, and we get surveillance, right? Let's go see Gavin. Let's go, do the thing. And Mila would absolutely be a threat, in my opinion, and we need to learn more. And we have several other individuals. So now let's look at trends. Now, when we looked at analytical capabilities, and me being around intelligence software for the last 20 years, and our team, quite frankly, being around intelligence software for the last 30 years, we looked at, what are analysts actually using in these intelligence platforms? And I'm not one to make assumptions on those types of things. I asked. I've been to countless conferences in the last 3 years. I ask all the time, what analytical capabilities are you leveraging? What platforms are you using? And so we took those answers and then based on our own experiences of collectively almost 100 years worth of experience, and we decided to put in things that we thought were useful, meaningful, and helpful. So that was our primary motivation in some of the analytical capabilities. And of course, we are building this, as we progress. One of the things that we put in is social network analysis. Personally, I've given many classes on social network analysis, and 90% of the time, 95% of my people who come in to learn about social network analysis don't know what it is, don't understand it, don't know how to use it. But with little training, you'll understand it's just more of a red flag indicator and a pinpoint, especially when you're looking at a large organization. And then one of the other things that we put in is bar charts and histograms. It allows you to look at your data from a statistical perspective, identify trends and patterns. So let's look at some of those. I want to focus on the transaction links, and I want to understand, based on day, time, day of the week, when and how and where are things happening. So I can see that Fridays are the hot ticket day. As an analyst, I'm going to make note of that. I can go back and look at, my screen is weird. I think it has something to do with Zoom. Give me a second. My screen won't show. Sorry, guys. There we go. I'm going to have to make things really small for a minute because I think sharing on Zoom is jacking with my screen. Anyway, looked at day. Maybe I want to look at time. I can see when the primary transactions are happening. This is all interactable. So as I select them on my chart, I can, on the graph, I can select them on my chart. I can look at the records. I can toggle through who's involved, what's going on, look at that, any of that information. So now I'm identifying, okay, when things are happening, but what is actually happening? So looking at something like, the transaction types, I see, I have 9 purchases, but weirdly enough, I have 13 returns without a proof of purchase. So sidebar and information that's completely useless, or maybe it's useful to you. Nordstrom has a really relaxed return policy. So you can walk in with just about anything and say, I want to return this, don't need a receipt. So criminal organizations love to target organizations like this because they can go steal items off the shelf and then turn around and say, hey, I want to return this. They'll put it back onto a gift card, but criminal organizations will then take that gift card and then go make other purchases. And now they've legitimately purchased something and then it ends up on the black market. I've seen it a million times. This is a use case of that specific case that I helped with years ago. So it's very interesting to me based on that case knowledge that I have, that there are 13 returns that without a proof of purchase involved in this organization. So that statistic, that trend, that bit of information would absolutely go in my intelligence report. So anyway, it helps identify some of those trends and patterns. And then I did briefly mention, and I'm just going to change the view on this because it's, again, so small now for you guys. Sorry. That there are two ways to query your data, right? Well, we could go back to the home screen and leverage our geospatial query. That's absolutely an option. But if you're already in the thick of your investigation and you want to pivot into a geospatial analysis, let's do it. So I'm going to go ahead and select any of my addresses that I have on my chart, and I'm going to push them right to a map. And boom, they're mapped. And we have a bunch of different layers. You can use your own. You can set which provider. If you're an Esri user, by all means, use that amazing program and software. But we have the ability to look at satellite, street display. And for those who love, again, to look at things from a more visual standpoint or a part of ComStat and things of that nature, we have the heat map. So with that, I'm going to jump back to my default. And so the 5 addresses that were referenced on my chart there are now mapped. And I could do a couple things here. I could just look and see, okay, that's interesting where they are. Or as an analyst, I might say, you know what? I'm curious, what else has happened around these addresses in the last 6 months? Have there been any arrests, shootings? I mean, think about any given situation. Let's say there was a residential burglary. High profile person, his house was broken into and some really like millions of dollars worth of art was stolen or something. Okay, I'm just creating things on the fly, bear with me. And you want to know, well, has there been any other residential burglaries in that neighborhood? With this, you can ask that question. So the 2 ways, through either drawing a polygon on the map or establishing a radius between on any given point. And then you can set a date and time frame. So again, if I only wanted to look at like the last 6 months, as well as an entity filter. So if I only wanted to see residential burglaries versus murders or other things. And then if you're here with the military, I've seen this used where we're doing route reconnaissance and we're looking at a convoy route. And I want to know, based on that convoy within a 1 mile radius of where that convoy is going to go, what else has happened along that route in the last 6 months? Have there been IEDs? Have there been riots? Have there been demonstrations, whatever, so that I can conduct a more thorough assessment of that route, or maybe we need to redirect. So a couple of different scenarios just to throw at you on how this can be used. But once I've identified the area of interest and I've applied my date and time frame and or my entity filters, I just submit my search and then it will plot any further information. You can see now that my 5 turned into a 22. So I have several other entities, addresses, events, whatever that may be, that have now been plotted on my map. So I like to think of this map as an exploratory format, because that's honestly what analysts do, right? We explore until we find something pertinent or of interest, and then we go down these rabbit holes, and then we build this amazing, beautiful, robust intelligence report. We share that with our counterparts, and then, you know, we make arrests and go to court and all things. Anyway, as I bring these other entities onto my map, I can click on any of them. If it's a cluster, it'll bring them all up and I can toggle through them. And as they become of interest to me, I can add them one or all to a list. Think of the list as like an intelligence bucket. I'm going to set that to a side and I'm going to continue along my map. So I'm going to explore the map further. Oh, this is interesting to me, just this one. So I'm just going to add this one. I'm going to look at this. Oh, this looks like more financial transactions. So now I have this intelligence bucket over here waiting for me. And I'm like, you know what? Now I want to explore that further. So I'm going to grab that list. I'm going to kick it over to my columns and rows view. And now I can explore this a little further. Okay. So again, we can toggle through this. I can look and say, okay, well, what is this? Let's look at the record. It's referenced in 2 different data sources. Cool. And then if I want to look at it further, I can send it to a chart. Now I can send it to the originating chart that I was working at, or maybe I want to kind of start fresh and get a fresh perspective. Look at those items that, again, these are results from my geospatial query. Sent it to a chart, and now I'm going to expand all. Let's go out 2 degrees of separation. See what we're working with across all of my 8 data sources. Now, again, I'm going to ask you 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 addresses. Go run 10 addresses through 8 data sources and come back to me by 2 degrees of separation with your results in a graphical format. I'll wait. Might be here for a while. But meanwhile, Blue Fusion just brought all of that information back to me in what looked to be possibly 10 separate addresses with 0 connection. Just redraw this a little bit. Oh, I don't like that draw. We actually have a cluster of a network and they're all intertwined. And so again, we just kind of restart our workflow from here. We decide which rabbit hole we want to chase. But the whole point, again, of Blue Fusion is to streamline your workflow from the point of where you need data to the point of where you're actually analyzing and investigating that data. That big gap that you've all shared with me that you spend hours, quite frankly, doing, we want to help close that gap into minutes. I've done so much research. I have talked to so many of our peers, and I can confidently say we are taking on average 5 hours worth of work and turning it into about 5 minutes. This helps your investigations. It better enables your organizations. It helps, very limited resources within smaller agencies get the most bang for their buck. It allows detectives to come in and wear dual hats and perform analytical or analysis type of functions more easily and quickly. And hopefully from what you've seen here, you understand all those values and what Blue Fusion brings to the table. So that is essentially Blue Fusion in a nutshell. I am going to jump back over to my presentation just for a moment. And then I do see that we have some Q&A, so we will address those before going into our panel discussion. So what are your next steps? You've just seen this amazing solution. You realize how much time could be saved, how much easier your life would be, and how less frustrating it would be. What do we do next? Well, the next conversation would look like this. Select what offering you want, and that's based on the type of access you want. So we have Pro Suite and Investigators, and I'm happy to explain that offline with any of you. Then you select what connectors you want, what data sources you want to be connected to. That's just a brief list of what I grabbed momentarily of what we already have built and can plug and play. But not to be worried about anything that you may not see on that list, because it takes our team a maximum of 80 hours to build one from scratch. And then we essentially put together a proposal, implementation, and you're up and running. And our goal is always within 30 days. So those are next steps. You want to have a conversation with me, please, please, please just email me at dallas@bluefusion.com. And I will be happy to set up a meeting, answer all of your questions specifically. Otherwise, you can throw those in the Q&A, because I'm sure someone in this meeting right now has a very similar question as you. So go ahead and throw it in the Q&A. And schedule a follow-up now. You can, again, email me there. So I'm actually going to introduce, I'm going to stop sharing just momentarily. And I'm going to introduce Don Freed. Don, if you could put on your, there he is. Okay. So I'm going to introduce Don. Don is our marketing director here at Blue Fusion, and he has so graciously taken on the task of our host for our panel discussion. I am going to give my voice a little bit of a rest. I'm going to throw that other slide back on so that you can visually see what Don is going to briefly discuss based on the credentials of the amazing people that is joining me here today. And Don, the floor is yours. I desperately need some water.
Yeah, take a break. Great job, Dallas, and thank you for running through that. And I'll quickly go through this because this is amazing. We have a powerhouse team here, and I could spend a lot of time going through it. So I try to condense this as best as possible, but apologies if I skim through this stuff. But you guys we got NSA in the house. I mean, we've got National Joint Terrorism Task Force. So let me run through this, starting with Mike Bonner right here. Kudos to the Marine Corps, hoorah. We have Mike's 10-year tenure with intelligence specialist at the Marine Corps. He was the intelligence school instructor, and 19 years in intelligence analysis experience. Collectively, this team here has got well over 50 years, probably 60 years of intelligence. But Mike's also been in the curriculum development and instructor role as well, and an I2 instructor in the previous life, and still a little bit dabbles in that. Let's jump into Allie Floyd. Man, Allie, what a bio. I was very impressed just putting this together. Some things I didn't even realize about you, just even working beside you, but retired, warrant officer, congratulations. 29 years in service and experience across law enforcement, criminal investigations, national security, counterterrorism. I mean, that's just a summation of your resume, but including the FBI, National Joint Terrorism Task Force, right there. You were in the SID for the Army. That's a criminal investigative division over there. You were actually special agent in charge. Well to do there. But expertise in felony investigations, intelligence analysis, counterterrorism, insider threat detection. This is our team. This is amazing. We'll end up with Dallas here, but let's jump to Gary. Gary Whitehead. If you're in the industry, you've got to know Gary Whitehead. I mean, I believe he even trained Dallas in I2 years ago, many moons ago. But Gary, 22 years experience military intelligence, then extensive training with the National Security Agency, prior roles, IBM, Lockheed Martin, I2, when was owned by IBM. You actually instructed IBM's first Veterans Initiative course, where we trained I2 analysts notebook to the veteran community. Those veterans went on to be hired by FBI, DEA, and others such as that. That's actually where I first met you, Gary. But degree in intelligence collection and mathematics, of all things. Great job for putting up that, not my strong point. But you also played, everybody collectively here is playing a key role in advancing the software, of course, and shaping the future of the product. Let's lastly wrap up with Dallas. Many of you guys in the audience probably already know Dallas, probably have attended many of her I2 tips and tricks, which is the origins and where this product was born from, a lot of the expertise and experience. But Dallas is very humble, plays a lot of roles here, especially a key role in creating the flagship technology. Combat veteran, you got intelligence analyst, let's see, Las Vegas PD. Then you were lent out to the DEA, actually, and you did a lot of narco operations and taking on the syndicates. That's right. And what I love best about Dallas is your just advocacy for justice and what you do out there. You run your nonprofit. You do the work with Skull Games. She also hosts the Not So Average Jane podcast. That's a great product if you guys want to get in there and learn a little bit more about Dallas and the work she does in the nonprofit space. But you've got this great retreat coming up in 2025 for female combat veterans. Everybody should pay attention to that. And lastly, I will leave you with Dallas. You should also published author. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. So Shattered Reflections is now available on Amazon and her website. So what a great memoir she wrote about her military and her personal journey from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, many moons ago. So what a great book that is. So that's our panel. This is amazing. You guys have such a great background. Did I leave anything out? There we go. Let's see your faces. Anything you guys want to add to that before we hop into the questions? I broke out a bunch of different questions for you guys based upon our conversations, and we should probably check the Q&A and start with those first. But anybody got anything before we jump into that?
No.
I'll spend all day talking about you guys' backgrounds. Let's take on the Q&A section first. We got Brian Salsig, I hope that's pronounced correctly, and very specific questions. So we love this type of stuff, Brian, and anybody can join in the chat if you want to expand upon this. But Brian's first question is, for reoccurring queries, can you suppress if there are no new results? Who would like to field that?
Just to answer that, Dallas, you can jump right on that one, can't you?
Well, I guess the short answer is yes. If you need more elaboration, Brian, I'm happy to go through it. But yeah,
Ask another question. That's right. So
Yeah.
yes, you can suppress if you have no new results. So these are all Brian here. So Brian's very inquisitive, which we would love.
Yeah. Brian's
Next
been
question.
around for a long time. We've known Brian for a decade at least.
Well, that's great. We should have a great conversation with Brian then after this. Let's go to his next question. Do you handle entity, similarity, and management? For example, he's citing Christina L. Wilson is the same as Christina Wilson, which may be the same as Chris Wilson. Similar question about the names that are the same, like William, Willie, Will, Bill, Billy, etc. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, he's talking about syntax and entity resolution essentially. So we do not have entity resolution built into our software. There are partners that we're looking at kind of bolting on in that in the connector process that you wouldn't even see that would handle that. But with that said, what I didn't get a chance to show you in my query, because I ran through it so quick, that when I wrote, last name Wagner, the default is a fuzzy match search. But you can do an exact, you can do a between, you can do a starts with, you can do an ends with. So you have all that flexibility in the query to weed out some of this. But as far as like the nicknames with the William, Willie, Will, Bill, and Billy, it's not going to catch on that just yet, but future possibly. So that's kind of the short end answer. Does anyone else have anything to add on the panel? Okay.
Gary does. A lot of that is built into the databases that you're gonna kind of hit with the connectors. So and then on the backside of that, a lot of that is kind of predicated on, do I really want to merge them or separate them? Because Billy, the drug dealer on the street, and William, the guy who works in corporate America, they can actually be the same person, but I really don't want to merge them because I want to keep their activities separate. So there's we can elaborate on that, but we can go deep into a rabbit hole on that.
Yeah,
good question.
very valid.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
But more to come inside of the technology. Future iterations will accommodate that, it sounds like. So last question. Oh, good. Steven's jumping in too. Another question from Brian here is, what about tattoo search? Can I search for dragon tattoo on the right hand or just dragon tattoo?
Ooh, great question. I can't reveal too much, but we are in the works of integrating with image analysis.
Yeah.
We do have the in video analysis. So that will be a part of the solution here momentarily. And just a preference and to be completely transparent, we're a fairly new software. Like we just launched in October, so we haven't necessarily been around that long, which can sound scary, yes, but also you have to remember you have a century worth of experience that's driving this. And we're looking at what is important, and we love feedback from the field. So that is coming down the pipe. And I should add that we already have an integration and partnership with the ability to do audio and unstructured text analysis with our solution. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, DS piece right there, but more to come in that area as well, Brian. So great question. We got another question coming in from Stephen Gomez. Can external information, not from a database, be introduced into the system?
1000%. So I kind of brushed over that in the beginning. But that's one of the values, one of the many values of Blue Fusion is we're not only accessing the sources that you have, you can leverage from internal, on your side of the firewall, but we can also build connectors to everything you're accessing external. So as you saw me run through the demonstration today, I was accessing open source records. Now I'm not going to say which one because I don't want to give priority to any of the vendors out there. We essentially partner with all of them, but your LexisNexis, Accurance, your TLO, your Clear, your Hooster, and everything in between, we have connectors for those. So again, streamlining that process of having to go data shopping.
Yeah, that's
With
right.
also with the import
Right.
function as well.
Yeah, very valid point, Mike.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very.
You want to go ahead and elaborate a little
Yeah,
bit on
so
that?
we can also, Stephen, just like in some other programs, if it's not in the database, we have the ability to import data into Blue Fusion. There's via a few steps, and we have we can definitely go over that with you. You want to reach back out to us, but so yes, the absolutely, like Dallas said, and there's also an import function that we can do as well.
The last piece I would like to add is most of the databases, if not all of them, except for the one that you own, is a read-only database. So trying to add information to those databases is a moot point. However, like Mike said, the importing function, and if you can write to the database, it only goes to the one that you own. So down the line, that becomes an intelligence repository because you're adding knowledgeable information that you have acquired to it. So, we can crack that egg a lot. Actually.
Yeah, some more follow-on questions coming in. I also dropped in the chat our marketplace. That's to our pre-existing data connectors. So these are pre-built already. So basically you can just jump right into the software and these are already established connections. If there's anything customized to your agency or your group that you guys utilize or your private database, that's something to be built. So that's a conversation to have up there. But thank you, Stephen, for the question. We're going to mark that down. Brian, jumping back into the fray. Here's another question coming in. So CJIS compliant.
Aegis.
How long do you retain imported records?
So the cool thing, you know what? I'm going to let Allie answer this because she's very familiar with CJIS and she's quiet over there. So Allie, you want to answer the CJIS compliancy?
Oh, we actually don't retain records at all. We actually host our connector that we connect to your data source on your side of the firewall. And so we don't actually collect any of your data. We just connect your data to other data sources. And so the data is secure based upon your server or where you're hosting your own data that you have access to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was perfect. And then I'll elaborate on the second part of the question. How long do you retain imported records? Well, that's completely up to you. And in order to be CFR compliant, 23, right? 23 CFR compliant.
Yep.
It's been a while since I've had to say all of that. We can set a ticking time bomb on untouched data. At a certain time, it is purged to be in compliance with that 23 CFR.
Great question, but just to answer that, it sounds like that's all taken care of, Brian. But let us know if you have any follow-on questions. That data sits with you guys on in your servers. So let's mark that one down as answered live. Steven's good on the import thing. That helps. Yes, sir, it does. And let's jump in. That's the last of the Q&As. Drop more in there if you guys would like. I would mark these ones as done real quick just so we can clear those off. And then we're going to pull up some questions for the panel. While we got you guys all in one room together, this is amazing. I'm just going to pick at you guys a little bit and tee up some questions for you. So let's start with Gary. So Gary, are you? Let's go, Godfather Gary. I think we probably call you. But This approach to data ingestion, how does it differ? I know it's been recapped in through the summary, but since you've been around for 20 plus years in the space, you've seen a lot of the different intelligence solutions out there. What's the big differentiator on these solutions?
That's kind of easy. We connect directly to the data.
You
And
used to hear all day long, of course.
multiple sets thereof. So there's no transforming that data into a data lake. And then, and Dallas hit on everything with there's no lag in data. You're touching the most current thing that sources have. So there's no middle, I don't want to say middleman, no middle database to kind of contend with. So
No middle
it's a game
processes,
changer.
functions.
And multiple there's of, and as many as you want, pretty much. The theory is that you can as many databases as you want. So
What's the most we've ever
anybody else want
done?
to add to that?
Brings the question. We don't have to answer that now, but how many have we done at once?
Yeah, we've touched a lot, but theoretically you can have as many as you can legally connect to. So, that changes the game big time.
Yeah, the
I
data
wish I had
ingestion
that
piece.
capability a long time ago, because the swivel chair action that you got to play around, well, you had to play around with, is time consuming. So we cut that down immensely. So it's a game changer. All right.
Yeah, in the world of
Dallas can add to
investigations.
that. Dallas would love to talk about that.
Well, and if I can interject too,
Yeah, there you go.
when it comes to a task force environment, for those individuals that are in law enforcement now, in today's world, we have all different types of task forces out there. And so that rapid integration of new data sources is always occurring. And so that is where we are very, that's where we come into play, because it's just I guess for better terms, a plug and play approach that allows us to quickly build those connectors to those new databases or certain technologies that, that you guys, the individuals in the field are accessing, or once they become available, where, like Gary said, it may take time for your IT or your CTOs to build out, or for those, it's going to take time, money, and a lot more integration, to actually connect all of those sources for you without Blue Fusion.
Well, let's stay right here with Ali. So you've got, quite the background here. So let's apply that to your terms and where you've played your roles, different roles. In the sense of, if you had Blue Fusion now with where you serve, and are in what terms of what Blue Fusion could provide in collaborative analysis in the team member support, what would that have done for you in your roles, prior roles?
Right. So if you can imagine, several of us are probably familiar with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces in the field. So at the national level, there were about 40 different agencies working together in a collaborative space, all having different accesses to their own databases, as well as other information that they may have had access to from their organization. We also had access to FBI information. And also being a DoD entity, had access to DoD information. If there was a server that held Blue Fusion and you had connectors connecting to all of those organizations that were part of the task force, because you're sharing information off of an MOU already. So you have that authority and you can build that out however, you want to build it out for the information that you want to share. So you have that ability to quickly query all of those databases instead of us spending hours and days trying to obtain information on an individual. So thinking about passport information from Department of State, travel records from Immigration, DHS, you're looking at Department of Transportation, Capitol Police, you got every DOD investigative service, if there's a military connection of such. I mean, you have, gosh, I could go into all different agencies, DEA, ATF, and so forth. But when once I saw and had access to Blue Fusion, I probably would have seen my family more. I probably would have been home more. I probably would have spent a lot less time trying to look for all of those needle in a haystack, which we didn't even talk about FindPath. We have the ability to find information to taking, which is what I think is amazing, taking two pieces of information where you may not believe there is an actual connection, to actually see if there is a connection with those two individuals or two pieces of information, whether it be two phones.
Sources.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we have that ability to find that connection very quickly within seconds. So
I see Mike nodding his head over there. Let's jump over to Mike because he loves the FindPath piece as well.
Yep.
And Mike, I know you've got nearly 2 decades experience in the intelligence space. In your time in the Marine Corps, historically through those 20 years as an intelligence specialist, elaborate a little bit more on how this could have been applied as well, and then maybe express a little bit more and expand a little bit more on your love for FindPath.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for these analytical tools, I've seen them in other programs. I've seen other, technology vendors, but it's here and it's in Blue Fusion. And, it's kind of like when I was, learning some of the other programs and actually like doing it, I'd get the question from a senior person, like, hey, why didn't you do this or this? And it's kind of like one of those something that could have been brought to my attention yesterday moments, but months and months of just drag, drop, not doing imports and other programs. And now I can, while I've been playing in the past year or two with Blue Fusion and seeing like, wait, I can use FindPath against 7 different data sets that would take me. I used to not know who to go get this data from. I used to not, know that this data existed. So just the fact that, it can all be consolidated in one place, and I can plunge through different silos and plunge the depths, come back up, and kind of use that art versus science approach that Blue Fusion helps us do, right? It gets through the entire intel cycle from the planning and direction, right? What silos do we want to look at? All the way up to the dissemination process, which Dallas went over, the multiple ways that you can disseminate this information. But the analytical tools, I know Dallas mentioned some social network analysis, the bar charts and histograms, they're all there. And they work perfectly fine. Me, Gary, Dallas, Annie, Dawn, other people in our company, we've tried to break it. And we keep on playing with it and playing with different scenarios. And I think we're at a good point with our analytical tools. We're going to keep evolving, but just like FindPath, such a powerful tool where it's not just I'm looking at 2 spreadsheets. I'm looking at 10, 12, 15, 20. Some of you said 80, data sources, and the tools are there. They're we're evolving them. We're still but they're there, and I'm proud of them. Yeah. So
well, it certainly sets the product apart in the space. But expand a little bit, Mike, because in our conversations, I know this is something that you touch on a bunch, is the ability to pivot 360 degrees within the data. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. So taking a lot of these data sources that we have, and what I always say with these analytical tools is, and I'm sure all of you in the audience, might probably know more than me or better than me, but getting the answer no is not a bad thing when we're using these analytical tools. Because what we're really trying to do is confirm or deny a course of action most of the time with these tools. So it's easy to pivot to say, okay, I'm going down this path. You know what? I use bar charts and histograms, and when Dallas is saying Wagner and Suggett and all that, and they just don't match up. The answer might be no. Blue Fusion does a good job of giving you the no answer, but also giving you the ability to kind of come back to the drawing board, come back to this planning and direction phase, and go another route, right? And we use the Blue Fusion is set up very well to use those analytical tools to help you in your process.
Yeah, and we're really talking about, you know, your workflow, the time consumption piece, how
Amazing.
you used to do it in the field to how you're able to do it now, right? In that sense, which
I'm talking months. This would have saved me months. Like I had a young Marine in Iraq, and I was using some certain network analysis tools that were available, and they'd say, "Here's this tool, go do it." And I was like, "What is this tool, and what do you mean go do it?" And it was drag drop for 6 months and 10,000 icons, right? And again, that was many years ago. But now, if I could have this program, that 6 months would probably turn into maybe 30, 45 minutes a day or two with the mass amounts of data, and then whatever my, Intel requirements and all that were to answer. So it's one of those I really wish, my life, like Andy said, my life had been a lot easier 20, 15, 10, 5 years ago.
Well, let's jump over to Dallas. Thank you for that, Mike. And then Dallas, just let's tee up something for you. Can you talk a little bit of the benefit to agencies? I know you do a high level overview in the conversation. We have the conversation all the time, so it's just a no-brainer for us. But let's just kind of recap the benefits to agencies that we can contribute to them. Blue Fusion can contribute to them, but sharing in examples of how we've improved the operational efficiencies. And again, it's going to sound a little bit redundant maybe in our brains, but touch on some of the past goes and some of the other projects that have implemented already, and speak to that, please.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I started looking at the statistics and then compared it in the amount of time that I was able to answer the questions that I needed to, the number 5 kept coming up. And it's just interesting because we can literally turn about 5 hours, which is the average amount of time that analysts are spending on a day-to-day basis, just getting access to the information they need to make conclusions, into about 5 minutes. You guys watch me do it.
Number 5 too behind you.
Boom. Wait, this side. Boom. 5.
That's a plant. She did that.
But I mean, it's interesting, this number 5. I don't know what it is, but anyway, 5 hours turns into about 5 minutes. And I'm not just speaking out of my bum. You guys literally watched me do it. If you think about 8 data sources and how easily I was able to pivot and go out 2 degrees and then pivot to geospatial and ask geospatial questions, then pivot back to graphical representation, explore those addresses. I will literally buy you a shot of whiskey every day for the rest of your freaking life if you can beat me in any other analytical platform. Hold me to it. I kid you not. And then here's something that I'm going to share with you that we weren't necessarily going to broadcast, but we're transparent in this regard. You can get all of this starting at under $5,000. Just saying. So there's your 5, your 5, and your 5. I did put a link in the chat. That is directly to Allie and my calendar. You will get whoever's available first and foremost. We would be happy to have a follow-up conversation with you. We want to understand, one, what your workflow is like right now. We want to understand what data sources you're already accessing so that we can compare and contrast what we already have access to and can very quickly streamline, implement for you. And we want to get a proposal in your hands so that you understand, one, you're going to save money right out of the gate, and 2, how to best move forward. Brian's in the chat. He says, should that be a 5-minute call? Well, the link is going to put you right. Yeah, never mind. I see what you guys are doing here. I'm brain fried. Yes. 5 hours into 5 minutes.
Hey, Brian, we've gotten those down from 45 minutes, though. Yeah.
Nice play.
Yes,
nice
Brian.
play.
Brian, but you and I have not caught up in years, so we're going to need a little bit more than 5 minutes, okay? Maybe 55 minutes? Or is that good?
That's funny. Well, and to the point, we'll round table with one final question for all you guys because this is of interest. But it's the beneficial handling of massive data ingestion, the time sensitivity piece to finding the pathway to intelligence and operational pieces. So this is it's a big discussion to have. And some of this is new to people, whether they didn't know ETL was a part of the process or not. And now it's becoming relevant because we fixed that, what we found and we fixed in the 20 plus years of just how things have been done. The grass is greener on the other side, right? I mean, that's what we're showing. The data duel would have been fabulous to illustrate. We'll get there someday perhaps, but we don't need to. It'll take you 15 minutes. But last question, and we'll roundtable for everybody because I would just love to hear from you guys. What, in your opinion, is Blue Fusion's strongest attribute?
I think you're going to get similar answers, but
Probably, but we'll start with Dallas.
I'll let Allie start.
Yeah, start with Gary, Allie, Mike, and we'll round and end with you, Dallas, and then you can wrap things up.
Yeah, starting with me. Okay, I'll start. I'm gonna make this easy. Everything. And when I say everything, there's a lot of things that Dallas didn't show you. So Mike alluded to the fine path, but I don't think people understand what that fine path thing is. We're talking about trying to find a connection between two things, not just individuals, two things separated by the number of sources that you have. So we use 5, and the databases that draw that connection, you know how long that takes? Astronomical. Like you take that 5 minutes and you throw it out the window. You take 5 hours, throw it out the window.
Right.
And now you're talking about 5 days to draw a correlation, right? And that's major, right? And then you turn around and talk about the ability to pivot. Because today I'm talking about financial records, and in 2 minutes I could be talking about criminal records. And then I can go to the DMV and pivot. And then so everything, and I'm passionate about this. And I've been on the other side of this coin playing around with other softwares, and those softwares have been done in by the amounts of data that they can handle. This one is doing the amounts of data that we can handle. And that's kind of unlimited right now. So it'll take a long time to kind of outrun this software. And I'll pass it on.
Allie.
So I'm gonna say it's kind of twofold, like the real-time data access with the automated federated searching, because when you say federated searching, that's awesome. That's there and that's awesome. But to add the automated part, you could be doing other things and working on other things as it's automating it, and you're obtaining all that access, all that data real time. So that's what I think.
Yes, we love automations, robots, AI. If we can get there a little bit down the road. Let's jump to Mike.
Yeah, and other than obviously the speed and the mass amount of data what Dallas just showed you, which you can pull in a matter of seconds, minutes, whatever, is one of my favorite, I think, underrated parts of this is when you can save queries and other people can access it. So, you see some analysts where there's like, I don't know if I should share this. I don't know if who needs it to be shared to. It's like Dallas said, you can set it up by the hour, by the month, by the whatever, and it's looking through all those databases and pinging, whoever you want to ping. So it's information flow in a timely manner, basically, is one of my favorite parts of it. And I'm also gonna shameless plug. We also provide training for this too. So if you later on down the road say, you know what, that was an awesome demonstration. Here's the resources. You call us anytime and we will sit down with your organization and walk you through step by step, A to Z.
Look at you guys. That was one of my final questions to tee up for Dallas. The support training. What support and training we offer to users to maximize the capabilities?
It's included because if you're not trained on the software, how the hell are you going to be successful on it? We're not going to nickel and dime you there. It's included.
We throw training in.
Yeah, at no extra cost right now, so it's a bonus.
Zero.
Yeah,
right now.
Can I alibi one? Because
yes.
I think I think that's, we forgot about, well, we didn't forget, it's just a lot of information here. But the other thing that I think is really important, we forgot to mention is, the folders and access to, that we can actually you can restrict access to individuals or teams. And so if you have a team, say you're working a covert investigation, or you have, your internal investigative team for insider threat or what have you, you can actually restrict the information you're querying to just select individuals. So we have that capability as well. And that's important because not everyone will be able to access that information that you're querying, and they won't be able to see it. So you have that ability to restrict who can see what is being queried and so forth.
Good point.
Yeah. My turn?
Yep.
Let's wrap it up with Dallas.
Go,
Knight.
Dallas, go.
So I mentioned this before I started with the demo, and I truly believe the dark horse in the list of key value proposition that Blue Fusion brings to the table is expanding these capabilities to the broader team. I worked for 10 years hand in hand with detectives and agents who wore dual hats. When I wasn't in the office, they tried to do their best to fill in as an analyst mindset. But trying to access all to the data and process it and sift through it can be very overwhelming. And in my opinion, is a DNA, blood bred in your brain mentality. You're not, you can't learn it. It's, if you're either an analyst or you're not. It's an analytical way of thinking. Again, my opinion. But detectives have also, and agents and operators have a different way of thinking, but they still need access to that data. And there are so many different occasions that I can think throughout my career that they needed to make operational decisions and had to hold off because they didn't necessarily have all the information and they didn't have access to me. So being able to put this technology into their hands when they're sitting at a bar at 2 a.m, on surveillance, on their phone, running queries on Blue Fusion, that is huge. It's absolutely huge. And there are also all those amazing little sheriff's departments who don't even have an analyst, and they have very limited resources and very limited funding. This will drastically improve their operations as well, and it's affordable for those smaller organizations too.
Yeah, we've got to be the lowest entry point in the marketplaces. So take advantage of that while it's there. But any last minute questions? We still have 31 people out there. So anybody got some final?
I just want to say, if there's any Q&A that's coming in, awesome, bring it. We'll stay here as long as you guys need us. But yeah. I do want to say we went 38 minutes over, and I just want to say a huge thank you so much for you guys spending. Again, we recognize the value of time. That's why we're trying to give it back to you. So we are so grateful for you spending this time with us and being patient with us and flexible, given our originating agenda was kind of manipulated a little bit out of our control. But I hope your imagination was able to run in that dual format as I went through those processes and you're able to see the value. Please, please, please book some time with Allie and me. It's just a 15-minute call. We'll answer anything outstanding. We want to first of all, we want to hear your feedback, honestly. Like, I would probably spend the first 10 minutes of that 15-minute call just wanting to know what you said. This product has been built and born and bred by this team, by analysts. You saw our credentials. You saw our background. We bring over 100 years worth of experience to the table. It is Intel analysts with amazing backgrounds coming to the table and saying, you know what, this is what we need. This is what works. And this is what's going to help in our community. Book 15 minutes with Allie or me. We'll have just an initial conversation, figure out what next steps are, answer any of your questions, and we'll go from there.